You. Can you hear me? Is this working? Hello? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Birgiolas. I lead the product design and research team at Sephora, and I'm really excited to be here today to share the story of how we redesigned the iOS and Android apps for Sephora, taking them from this to this. And I'm going to talk about the problems we set out to solve, specifically why we decided to move from a hamburger menu to a bottom nav. I'm going to talk about the process we followed to get to a final solution, including the importance of following a disciplined design process, the importance of using data to inform your design, and the importance of including users in an iterative design process. I'll touch on some of the highlights of the redesigned app, and I'll share what we learned along the way. So a bit about Sephora, if you're not familiar. We're a prestige beauty retailer owned by LVMH with over 2,500 stores in 32 countries. Our US headquarters are in San Francisco, so we're known for being a pretty tech-savvy and innovative retailer. And we have a cult-like following of customers who are known as beauty insiders. And if any of you are beauty insiders, you may know us more like this. And if you're the significant other of a beauty insider, this may resonate. So for some context, our Sephora apps, our iOS and Android apps, are part of this much broader omni-channel ecosystem. We heard it mentioned a little bit before. And one thing we know for sure is that our customers are constantly bouncing between our apps, our website, our stores, email, social, and more. So the Sephora strategy is to put the customer at the center of everything we do and allow them to engage with us and shop whenever, wherever, and however they choose. So it was important to keep this kind of bigger picture in mind as we embarked on our design journey. Apps are important to Sephora, very important. They generate a huge part of our online revenue, and I apologize, I had actual stats on here, but we're a private company, so I can't get into the nitty-gritty, so everything's kind of abstract. Huge portion of online revenue. We have many, many, many millions of monthly active users on both our apps. A huge vast majority of those users are signed in, which presents a great opportunity for personalization. A big chunk of those users are Rouge members, which is our highest loyalty tier, which means they're our most engaged customers. And visits and revenue are both growing pretty impressively year over year. So apps are a very important thing to the business and to our users. So now I'll talk a bit about the problem. I'll give you a hint. It has to do with the hamburger menu. Essentially, we had tons of features added to our apps over the years, tons of new screens, but it was never within the scope of an individual project to kind of consider the navigation holistically. So we ended up with a hamburger menu that was bloated and confusing and really frustrated the design team. So we kind of built a pitch to have an app navigation redesign project included in the roadmap. And this was great because the business kind of also had an appetite at the same time to refresh the app to reward our loyal clients. And so the design team was particularly proud of this because it's not every day that a design team is able to influence the actual roadmap. So everyone loves to gawk at bad design, so I want to take a minute here to point out some examples of things that drove our design team and our users crazy. So in this first example, let's imagine I want to track one of my recent orders. I open the Sephora app, I tap on the hamburger menu, I'm assaulted with this very long list of items. I don't see anything about my account or about my orders. Eventually, somehow I realize that I need to tap on this area, which has no affordance, and then I'm shown a secondary nested menu. This is so painful for me to show. And I see 6 items down, my recent orders, and I can track my order. Now this is bad because tracking orders is one of the most frequented parts of the app. So making this hard to find is not good for business. In this next example, let's say I want to look up a purchase I recently made in a store. So again, I open that secondary nested menu. I'm pogo sticking in and out of different sections. I don't see anything related to stores or purchases. Eventually, I try tapping on lists. I see this restock past purchases carousel, tap in there, and only then am I able to see a complete list of my in-store and online purchases. Now, this is bad for 2 reasons. First, lists is, in terms of mental model, something that I think that I created myself as opposed to something that the app generated automatically for me. And also, replenishment is a huge business driver for Sephora. So making this so hard to find, bad for business. And third, is we love to do this thing in our apps for some reason. We love to duplicate menu items. So you'll see lists appearing twice, you'll see the community menu appearing twice, and you'll see our shop menu appearing twice. And to add insult to injury, they don't even match. So hopefully this gives you a bit of a sense of what we were dealing with. Again, there were a lot more usability issues, but these are kind of nav specific. So our next thing we ran into, as a design team, we knew we wanted to kill the hamburger. We knew the future was in bottom navigation, but we encountered a bit of organizational resistance and friction from our engineering partners and our business partners to make the switch. Hamburgers are so easy. You could just keep throwing things in there. Amazon is still doing it, so it's got to be good, right? But we knew it was not the right way to go. And I think the business was also intimidated by the prospect of having to really crystallize our priorities into 5 main tabs, because you're kind of limited in how many main sections you can have in the app. And there are so many things that we try to do with our Sephora app. So we built a strong case to try to get everyone on board, and I'll cover a few of the points that we made to kind of make the case. And credit for a lot of these goes to Google's own Luke Wroblewski, who publishes a lot on this subject. The first is around discoverability and the app mental model. So I use Facebook as an example here. With a hamburger menu, everything's hidden. Whereas with a bottom nav, I can see immediately where I am in the app, where else I can go, and what the main features of the app are. So I can quickly form a mental model and wrap my head around what this app is all about. Second is around ergonomics. Hopefully this is very old news by now, but as phone screens get larger and larger, it becomes harder and harder to reach those top corners of the phone. So a bottom navigation is much more comfortable for the thumb to reach, especially if I'm on the subway one-handed navigating. Next point is around multitasking. So in a bottom nav approach, each bottom nav item represents a separate stack of screens with different activities happening in each. So I can be editing my basket in one tab and jump over to another tab to refer to some product information and jump back to my basket back and forth without losing my place. In our hamburger approach, it was just one stack of screens. So every time I navigated into the hamburger, I would lose my place and basically only able to single task. So these are some of the points that we used. There's one more. This is actually the most persuasive one. Companies that switch from a hamburger menu to a bottom nav, there's been a lot of published research that making the switch is really great for metrics around engagement, satisfaction, speed, and perception of speed. And these all ladder up to conversion and revenue improvements, which is why we're all here. So we were able to get kind of a soft approval to explore a bottom nav approach. And now I'll talk a bit about the process we used to kind of bring the design to life. So our team was scrappy by some standards. We had myself, 2 product designers, 1 product manager, and 1 researcher. And we did the entire research and design phase in just 10 weeks. Now this may not hold a candle to how big companies like Google do things, but my hope is that it can inspire smaller teams to follow a disciplined process, be scrappy, involve users, and make data-informed design decisions. So at a high level, our design process looked kind of like this hopscotch diagram. We started off by defining our goals, so we had a rough idea of what our end state would look like. We moved into input gathering mode, which was research. I'll get more into that in a moment. We used those inputs to inform design principles, which we used as guardrails to help us in our design and testing kind of design execution phase. And then we got to a point where we were ready to implement. So in terms of goals, they were to reorganize the app in a way that made sense to the user, migrate to a bottom navigation, improve styling where we could within the scope of the project. And then we thought, hey, while we're under the hood, let's look for opportunities to increase engagement, particularly with non-shopping related functions of the app, things like the Sephora community that people weren't engaging with as much as we want. And also look for opportunities to add more personalization to the app. And we needed to do this all while remembering that this is not a whole app redesign. This project is not supposed to touch the product page, the basket, the checkout. This is all just about reshuffling the navigation. So we had to kind of keep that in mind. Next, we went into our input gathering phase. Some people might call this research. We call it input gathering. And we decided early on to gather as many inputs from as many sources as possible to inform our design. And we talked to a lot of different sources. So we talked to our business stakeholders, analytics, market research and consumer insights. We looked at app store reviews. We listened to call center complaints about the app. We did usability testing of our current app, of competitor apps, of apps we found inspiring. We did card sorting studies. We did an information architecture audit. Basically everything we could to learn as much about the landscape in order to inform our design. And this took a lot of discipline because as designers, we want to dive in right away and start solving and solutioning. But if you restrain yourself and just kind of hold back and take the time to steep yourself in the data, you can really make much more informed decisions and come out with a much better result. So there were so many inputs, there were so many insights that we got from these inputs. I wish I could share them all, but I'll just highlight a few. The first was around analytics, and the analytics team at Sephora is busy. We like to make a lot of data-driven decisions, and our team was impatient. We were operating on a tight timeline, and we didn't really have time to get in their queue and wait for them to generate reports for us. So being the scrappy and resourceful team that we are, we kind of made a deal with them to come and train our design team on how to use the analytics tool and pull our own reports. So this allowed us to do self-serve analytics, get data on our own terms whenever and wherever we needed it, and we learned a lot of interesting things. The first is that search drives conversion. This may be old news for a lot of you, but we learned that a lot of our visitors are engaging with search. Again, I had to take out the specific number. And of those visitors that engage with search, they convert at a much higher rate than those that don't engage with search. So search is huge, very important. Next is from analytics, we learned that people are engaging a lot with shopping-related content on our app. So things like looking at just arrived products, tracking their orders, looking at their loves lists. Loves lists is their favorite products. But they're spending a lot less time than we want them to be spending looking at what we call our teach, inspire, play content. So things like Sephora Virtual Artist, where you can try on makeup using augmented reality, engaging with the Sephora community, and engaging with Happening at Sephora, which is like our version of Eventbrite, where you can see all the different classes, services, and events happening at Sephora stores in your local area. We also did usability studies, and we conducted in-person studies and remote studies on our app and on competitors' apps. And one of the main things we learned is that users know what they want before they open the app. So they have an idea in mind, and then they want to get in, get out, and get back on their day. Users are very task-oriented and on the go, quickly kind of checking, buying, and replenishing in the app. And a quote from one of our user interviews that demonstrates this well is from Kara. She says, "In general, when it's more explorative, I like to do shopping on desktop. But if I already know what I'm going to get, then it's going to be on the phone." So that was a very interesting learning on how users kind of relate to mobile. We also learned that users have blindness to our non-shopping features. So we had users in for in-person interviews, and we kind of pointed out these items further down the hamburger menu, like Happening at Sephora, Community, Virtual Artist. And even our most loyal users who say they open the app every day were just like, "Oh, I never really noticed that. I never really looked down there. Oh, that's interesting." And we were like, "What? Oh my God." And we also learned that users on smaller screens just don't scroll. They didn't think that the hamburger menu was something that was scrollable, and so they missed a bunch of the items down the list. We also did card sorting studies, which were super interesting. We had users come in and organize basically every screen of the app in a way that made sense to them. We kind of had them imagine that they were designing their own beauty app. How would they organize it? And this was not just about like product category and product taxonomy. This was like every screen in the app. And we noticed that consistently 5 key themes emerged. The first was a bucket of all things around shopping and product. The second was all things about physical stores and things that happen in the stores and finding stores. The third was everything about me and my account with Sephora. The fourth was this kind of other bucket, things that help support me in my shopping journey but don't really fit neatly into any of the other buckets. And fifth was this theme of things that I should be able to access anywhere in the app, like signing in, signing out, search, and basket. And the main learning here was that this me category was very big. It was something that we had never thought of before, but users felt very strongly that all this content belonged together and struggled to break it down any further. So back to the process, we kind of took all these insights and inputs, again, many more than I covered here, these were just a few, and internalized them, synthesized them, and used them to inform principles, which we use to then kind of act as guardrails in our design process. And I'll talk about what those design principles were here. So the first was to honor shopping intent. So the user's primary goal in the app is to shop. That needs to be the foremost focus of our design. Search needs to be front and center. As I mentioned, users are engaging with search as a primary method of navigating more and more. And also it encourages higher conversion. So how can we put that front and center? Make features discoverable. So if we want to engage with that teach, inspire, play content, we need to make that stuff discoverable. We can't bury it. Also make it personal. We want our user to feel like the app is personalized just for me. And respect the omni journey. It was mentioned before, but our apps play a pivotal role in bridging the physical world and the digital world. So stores need to have a big strong presence in the app. So then we entered our design execution phase, which was kind of iterative cycles of design and testing. And we started that process with ideation. And we challenged ourselves to think unconstrained about as many different ideas for design patterns and organizing principles for the app as we could, things that we would be testing with users. So things like, should search be in the header or should it be a bottom nav icon? Should home and shop be separate bottom nav items or should they be combined to save space for some other footer bottom nav item? And how do users respond to a more screen for kind of overflow content? Do they ignore it as like a kitchen sink catch-all or do they actually engage with it? And we created this long list. And what we ended up doing was working the list of all of the different design patterns and all our different organizing principles together. And it took 5 separate individual prototypes to get all our different ideas represented. And you can see those represented here in our information architecture options of A through E, and also here in our first round of prototypes, A through E. And you'll see that there's a bunch of different things coming to life here, different icons, different color schemes, different things happening in the headers and footers, different organizing principles. And these were designed in Sketch and linked together into interactive prototypes using InVision, pretty comprehensive, so they felt like the real app. And we used remote unmoderated testing to expose these to users. And what we did after the first round is we cherry-picked the top performing design patterns and organizing principles from each of the prototypes in round 1 and incorporated them into 2 new prototypes in a second round. And we kind of continued this process of combining, tweaking, testing, and refining, adding polish and fidelity with each subsequent round until we got to a 5th prototype. And we got to a place where users were able to complete all of our tasks with ease. So shout out to our designers for being so agile in this process, because this took a ton of work to make all these prototypes, but it really led us to a great place. So in the end, we created over 189 unique screens across 10 prototypes, collected over 600 hours of footage, and engaged with over 165 testers. And I'll talk a bit more about how we went through all of that footage in a moment. So let's look at some of the highlights of the redesign. Here's just kind of a snapshot of the look and feel of the new app. The first thing to notice is our app header and footer. So in the header, we have search. It's an open text field. You can start searching with just one tap, and it's present throughout the app, so you can start a search from anywhere in the app, whereas our current app only has it available on the home screen. We also elevated the user's loves list next to basket in the top right corner of the app. Our research showed that users use their loves list as kind of a staging area for products before they're ready to commit and move them over to basket. And users also kind of shuttle products back and forth, trying to meet basket thresholds. So it was important to have those side by side. And then at the bottom there, you'll see our 5 main bottom nav tabs: home, shop, me, stores, and inspire. And I'll get into a bit more about those now. So here's our before view of the home screen. It was previously a static feed of marketing banners that was not very shoppable. So what we did was switch that into a much more dynamic feed of personalized content carousels and personalized product carousels. So you're getting exposed to product and getting pulled into the shopping journey the moment you open the app. Another key innovation on our new home screen is the introduction of this New For You carousel. This was previously a standalone screen, a feed of personalized offers and promotions that our research showed that a lot of users came opening the app every day to check what's new in that section. So it made a lot of sense to highlight highlight that content on a carousel front and center on the home screen, so it's the first thing users see when they open the app. The Shop tab went from this kind of long laundry list of text categories to a more visually presented, a more visual presentation of our shop categories. The Me screen, one I'm most excited about, directly influenced by that card sorting study, and it basically presents all the users' personal and account-related content from across the entire Sephora ecosystem in one place, and it's clearly personalized with my personal avatar and my name, and I can see everything from my loyalty status and my points to my orders that I can track, and I can see my community ranking, my color IQ number, everything personal to me as it relates to Sephora. And this tested very well with users. Next is the Stores tab, which lands me on happening at Sephora, so I can see all the cool activities that are happening at Sephora stores in my metro area, so casting a wide net. I can also find a store or go into store mode up there. And then finally, the Inspire tab, which houses all that kind of additional enhanced content that isn't a core part of my shopping journey, but kind of supports me in my shopping decisions. And these features are also woven in throughout the main shopping journey as well. So what did we learn? We learned a bunch, and I'll start with kind of more tactical, specific things, and then kind of expand to more philosophical, more high-level stuff. So on UI, the More tab didn't work for us. So we found that users kept getting stuck looking for content in the 4 other tabs, and they just kind of ignored the More tab, potentially because the information sent of the word more is so weak. So we looked at the screen content we had on the More screen and realized that it all kind of had a similar theme, which was supporting the user in their shopping decisions. So we played around with some other names for that content, and we landed on Inspire and updated the icon to look like stars, and test completion went way up. Users were able to find things in there much more easily. We also had one additional concern that users might not explore that tab as much as we want them to, because again, it's not part of the core shopping journey. So we added this very subtle sparkle animation, there it is, that will kind of subtly, occasionally play for users who haven't engaged with that tab to kind of draw their attention to it so they could see what's in there, and kind of get that incorporated into their mental model of the app. We also learned that testing uncovered things that we weren't expecting. So is anyone confused by what this icon represents? We weren't. It's our basket icon. We take it for granted internally because we've had it forever and no one's really thinking about that it potentially could cause a problem. But in our testing, users really struggled to understand what it was. They were like, is that another hamburger menu with a triangle on top? Is that like a beehive or a sinking ship? So not something that we were looking for, but we learned that something we needed to address. So we updated the icon to be much less abstract, and the new design performed much better. We also learned that a unified design makes maintenance much easier. So most of our users are on iOS, sorry, Google. So we decided to do most of our research and design in the iOS track. We don't really have resources to be able to support separate tracks anyway. So we decided to do all our research and design in iOS and then roll whatever design changes we made on iOS over to Android to kind of get to a unified design or semi-platform agnostic design. And this is going to make change management and maintenance so much easier going forward because you kind of have one core design mechanic, and then you can kind of tweak it a little bit to customize it per platform, but the core flow is pretty consistent across channels. On research and testing, we learned that it's important to do the research first. Resist the urge to jump into design right away. Gather as much data from as many data sources as you can to inform design first, and try to expose your design team and product team to all of these inputs so that you are working from a similar shared knowledge base. It really helps. Next is that user preference does not equal user behavior. So pay attention to what users do, not what they say. An example of this is we had market research surveys that showed users self-reported reasons for downloading the app, and self-reported top activities in the app were one thing, but then when we looked at analytics and watched their behavior in testing, we learned completely different things about them. So if a user is giving you preference data, it's kind of helpful because it helps you understand what's important to them, but take it with a grain of salt because users really don't know themselves as well as they think they do. Test everything and then test more. So a lot of designers get hung up on trying to make one hero design right out of the gate, and we challenged ourselves to kind of spread our ideas across as many prototypes as we could and experiment with as many different things and do a lot of testing and learning. So we explored as many ideas as possible and just kind of tested, iterated, combined, mixed and matched until the cows came home and came up with a much greater result. I would have never expected that we went through 10 different prototypes to get to a final solution, but it definitely led to a much better result. Next, on research and testing, is to use a task list as a scorecard. So we created a master list of tasks that that users should be able to perform in the app, and we used that list to evaluate every prototype that we did. And that allowed us to have a kind of consistent baseline or a consistent benchmark to compare all the different prototypes. Survey for difficulty after every task. So we had 600 hours of video footage. We didn't have the capacity to review every hour of video to look for problems. So what we did was after every task, we surveyed the users to give us a score of how difficult it was. That way, when we looked at our metrics, we could zoom in right on issues that were causing trouble for the users and just view those videos and address those issues instead of having to sit through 600 hours of video. So that's a great tip. On collaboration, listen to stakeholders, but don't let them drive. We have dozens of stakeholders at Sephora, and they all wanted their feature front and center in the app. So we held sessions to kind of hear their pain points, listen to their wishes, but we kind of went away, and the final decisions resided with a small group of individuals whose main priority was to put the customer first. This is my favorite. Research and test results are the antidote to design by committee. And so if you want to get something approved, tell the story of all the data and inputs that you use to inform your design, and then show the results of your usability testing to prove that the design worked. And we never ended up sliding into design by committee once, and approval was pretty much instant and unanimous, which I've never experienced before. But if you have the evidence and you have the storyline, it makes so much sense. Our stakeholders were just like, wow, yes, let's do it. And finally, partner with developers early. It's easy to exclude your developers from the design process, but they were instrumental in our process because they helped us with creative problem solving. They helped us vet quickly what was and wasn't possible. And by the time it came to build the product, they were so much more invested than they would have been had we been more siloed, because they were involved in the entire design and planning process. So it really was a team effort, and everyone is really equally invested in the success of the overall project. And finally, be resourceful. So do whatever it takes, adopt a do whatever it takes mentality, learn to pull analytics yourselves, use remote unmoderated testing to save time and money, get the entire team to pitch in on ideas and creating and testing and reviewing prototypes, and I think the results will be amazing. In terms of the project status, Android is launching in August. We've released to 20% of our users today. So if you hold up your phone camera to this QR code, you'll be taken to your respective app store to download the app. iOS is launching in September, and if you turn on auto update, you'll be sure to have the latest version the moment that it drops. Thank you.